Welcome to Boring History for Sleep. In this video, we're taking a gentle journey back to one of history's most challenging periods, the freezing winter months in medieval European villages. In the 12th and 13th centuries, when there were no modern heating systems, glass windows, or abundant food supplies, how did ordinary people survive these harsh seasons? Snowfall could isolate villages for months. Temperatures could drop to minus 20 degrees Celsius. In this journey, we'll encounter the silent witnesses of those times, ancient village remains, wall traces, and forgotten ways of life. Relax, close your eyes, and let's drift into the story. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share where you're watching from in the comments. Let's begin. The first chill of autumn air touches your face as you step outside the wooden cottage. It's early September in the year 1247, somewhere in rural England, and you can already sense that this winter will be particularly harsh. The leaves on the oak trees surrounding your small village are beginning to turn golden brown, and there's that unmistakable crispness in the morning air that signals the changing of seasons. Your name is Thomas, and you're a peasant farmer living in a village of perhaps 40 souls. The harvest has just been completed, and now comes the most crucial time of the year, preparing for the long, dark months ahead. You know, as do all your neighbors, that winter preparation can mean the difference between life and death. There are no grocery stores to visit when supplies run low, no central heating to keep the cold at bay, and certainly no modern medicine if someone falls ill. Walking through the village this morning, you notice how everyone moves with a certain urgency. The blacksmith, old William, is working overtime to repair farming tools and create new ones before the ground freezes solid. His forge glows brighter than usual, and the rhythmic pounding of his hammer against metal creates a steady soundtrack to these preparation days. Sparks fly into the cool morning air, and you can smell the distinctive scent of hot iron mixing with the wood smoke that already begins to drift from cottage chimneys. Your own cottage, like most in the village, is a simple structure made of timber frame filled with wattle and daub, a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung that hardens to create walls. The roof is thatched with straw, and while it keeps most rain out, you know from experience that winter winds can find every tiny gap. The windows are small openings covered with oiled parchment or thin horn slices, as glass is far too expensive for common folk like yourself. These coverings let in some light, but do little to keep out the cold. Inside your cottage, your wife Margaret is already hard at work organizing the harvest bounty. Sacks of grain line one wall, barley, oats, and rye that must last until next summer's harvest. She's carefully sorting through root vegetables, turnips, parsnips, and onions that will be stored in the cool earth cellar beneath the cottage floor. The cellar, dug deep into the ground, maintains a constant temperature that prevents freezing while keeping food from spoiling too quickly. The main room of your cottage serves multiple purposes. During winter, it becomes not just your living space, but also your workshop, dining area, and even shelter for your most valuable animals. The central hearth, made of stone and clay, will soon become the heart of your survival strategy. Right now, Margaret is testing the chimney draw, making sure smoke will rise properly when the fires burn day and night in the coming months. You own 2 pigs, several chickens, and a goat. As autumn progresses, you'll make the difficult decision about which animals to slaughter before winter truly sets in. Fresh meat won't keep long without refrigeration, but there are time-tested methods of preservation that your family has used for generations. The larger pig will likely be slaughtered in November, just as the first hard frost arrives. Every part of the animal will be used. Nothing can be wasted when survival depends on making the most of every resource. Margaret has already begun the process of salting pork from an earlier slaughter. Large wooden barrels filled with coarse salt and herbs line the cottage wall. The salt draws moisture from the meat, creating an environment where harmful bacteria cannot survive. She'll also smoke strips of meat over the hearth, hanging them from the rafters where the constant wood smoke will slowly cure them into jerky that can last for months. The process of food preservation extends far beyond meat. Margaret spends her days preparing vegetables for winter storage. Cabbages are packed in layers of salt and stored in wooden casks, creating sauerkraut that will provide essential nutrients during the vitamin-scarce winter months. Apples from the village orchard are carefully sorted, the best ones wrapped individually in straw and stored in the cellar, while damaged ones are quickly dried near the hearth or pressed into cider that will ferment into a mildly alcoholic beverage. Your children, young Robert and Mary, understand their roles in the family's winter preparation. Robert, at 12 years old, helps gather and split firewood, a task that will continue throughout the winter months. The family will burn through an enormous amount of wood, not just for cooking, but for the constant heating needed to survive. Mary, at 10, helps her mother with food preparation and learns the essential skills she'll need as an adult woman in this harsh world. The village priest, Father Benedict, reminds everyone during Sunday services that these autumn weeks are crucial. His small stone church becomes a gathering place where neighbors share advice about winter preparations. The older villagers, those who have survived many harsh winters, pass down their knowledge to younger families. They speak of winters when snow drifted higher than cottage doors, when wolves came closer to the village searching for food, and when entire families didn't survive until spring. Water preparation is another critical concern. The village well might freeze solid, and even when it doesn't, drawing water in freezing temperatures becomes dangerous work. Your family has begun filling every available container with water, storing barrels and clay pots throughout the cottage. Some of this water will freeze during the coldest months, but keeping it inside means you won't have to venture out into blizzards when fresh water is needed. The village miller, Jeffrey, works frantically to grind as much grain as possible before his water wheel freezes. The sound of the grinding stones echoes across the village from dawn to dusk. Families queue with their grain, knowing that once winter truly arrives, fresh flour will become impossible to obtain. The mill's water wheel, powered by the small river that runs past the village, will soon be locked in ice for months. Clothing preparation is equally vital. Margaret and other village women spend their evenings by the hearth, spinning wool from the village sheep into yarn. This yarn becomes warm clothing, blankets, and repairs for existing garments. Every piece of clothing must be examined and mended before winter arrives. A tear in a woolen cloak might seem minor in autumn, but in the depths of winter, it could mean the difference between warmth and freezing. The village tanner, Peter, is overwhelmed with work as families bring him animal hides to be processed into leather. These hides will become boots, gloves, and patches for existing leather goods. The tanning process, using oak bark and other natural materials, takes weeks to complete. Peter works through the night, knowing that once winter sets in, his outdoor work will become nearly impossible. As October arrives, you notice subtle changes in animal behavior that signal harder times ahead. The village cats become more aggressive in their hunting, instinctively knowing that food will become scarce. Dogs stick closer to their human families, and even the usually independent pigs seem to sense the coming hardship. Birds begin their migrations, and you watch flocks of geese flying south with a mixture of envy and melancholy. The lord of the manor, Sir Edmund, makes his rounds through the village, assessing how well his serfs are preparing for winter. His survival isn't at risk. His stone manor house has multiple hearths, thick walls, and stores of food that could last years. But he knows that if too many of his peasants die during winter, there will be no one to work his fields come spring. It's in his interest to ensure basic survival, though his help is limited and comes with obligations. Evening activities change as autumn progresses. Instead of working in fields until sunset, families now gather inside their cottages earlier. These long evenings are filled with essential winter work. Men repair tools and craft new ones, women spin and weave, and children learn skills they'll need to survive. Stories are told and retold, not just for entertainment, but to pass down crucial survival knowledge from generation to generation. The village storyteller, an old woman named Agnes, becomes particularly important during these preparation weeks. Her tales aren't just entertainment. They contain practical wisdom about surviving harsh winters. She speaks of the winter of 1234, when snow fell for 40 straight days, and how the villagers survived by sharing resources and working together. Her stories teach lessons about rationing food, staying warm, and maintaining hope during the darkest months. Religious observances take on added significance as winter approaches. The church teaches that hardship is part of God's plan, but also emphasizes the importance of charity and community support. The village stores a portion of the harvest in the church granary to be distributed to families who might not have enough to survive. This system isn't perfect, and every villager knows that some winters it isn't enough. As November arrives, the first frost appears on the thatched roofs at dawn. You can see your breath in the morning air, and ice forms on the water buckets left outside overnight. The urgency of preparation intensifies. Margaret works from before dawn until well after sunset, and you notice how her hands are becoming rough and cracked from the constant work in cold air. The slaughter of the larger animals begins in earnest now. The pig you've been fattening all summer meets its end on a cold November morning. This is both a sad and celebratory moment. Sad because the animal has been part of your family's daily life, but celebratory because it represents survival for the winter months ahead. Every neighbor helps with the slaughter and processing, knowing that their turn will come and they'll receive the same assistance. Our blood from the slaughtered pig is caught in bowls and quickly mixed with grain to create blood pudding, a nutritious food that helps prevent the anemia that often afflicts people during long winters with limited fresh food. The intestines are cleaned and used as natural casings for sausages, while the fat is rendered into lard for cooking and even lighting. Nothing is wasted. Waste means death in this harsh world. The village begins to take on a different character as winter preparations near completion. Smoke rises constantly from chimneys as families test their heating systems and begin the preservation processes that require steady fires. The sound of axes splitting wood echoes throughout the day. Children's laughter becomes less frequent as even the youngest members of the community understand the serious nature of the coming season. You spend your days checking and rechecking every aspect of your winter preparations. The cottage walls are examined for gaps that might let in cold air, and any cracks are filled with mud and straw. The thatch roof is inspected and repaired where necessary. The cellar is organized and reorganized to make the most efficient use of space for food storage. Your relationship with your neighbors becomes more important as winter approaches. Medieval village life is intensely communal, and winter survival often depends on cooperation and mutual aid. You help your neighbor John repair his cottage roof, knowing that when your own roof needs work, he'll return the favor. These networks of mutual obligation and assistance are what make survival possible in such harsh conditions. The nights grow longer and colder, and by late November, frost appears regularly. You've completed most of your major preparations, but small tasks continue daily. Wood must be split and stacked, food stores must be checked and rotated, and tools must be maintained. The comfortable routine of summer is replaced by the constant vigilance that winter survival requires. Margaret has begun the winter cooking that will sustain your family through the cold months. Heavy stews made from preserved meat and root vegetables simmer constantly over the hearth. These one-pot meals make the most of limited ingredients while providing the calories needed to maintain body heat in cold conditions. The smell of these stews, rich with herbs like thyme and rosemary that Margaret dried one night during the summer, fills the cottage and creates a sense of warmth and security. The village's social dynamics shift as winter approaches. Disputes that might have simmered during the busy harvest season are now resolved quickly, as everyone understands that community cooperation is essential for survival. The village council, made up of the oldest and most experienced residents, meets more frequently to discuss winter preparations and to mediate any conflicts that could threaten group survival. December brings the first real snow, and with it, a profound change in daily life. The paths between cottages become treacherous, and venturing outside requires careful planning. You wear multiple layers of wool clothing, topped with a thick cloak that Margaret wove from sheep's wool. Your feet are wrapped in wool cloth before being placed in leather boots that have been treated with animal fat to make them water resistant. The cottage door, which stood open during summer months, is now kept tightly closed. A heavy curtain made from thick wool hangs just inside the door, creating an additional barrier against the cold. When someone must enter or leave, they do so quickly to minimize heat loss. The simple act of opening the door lets in enough cold air to make everyone shiver, and the fire in the hearth flickers from the draft. Inside the cottage, your family has settled into the winter routine that will sustain you through the coming months. The main room, which seemed spacious during summer, now feels crowded with the addition of food stores, extra clothing, tools, and even some of your smaller animals. The goat and several chickens have been brought inside, both to protect them from predators and to take advantage of their body heat. Your daily schedule revolves entirely around maintaining warmth and conserving resources. You wake before dawn, not because there's work to be done outside, but because the fire needs tending. Throughout the night, you and Margaret take turns adding wood to the fire, ensuring it never dies completely. A dead fire in winter could mean death for the entire family, as relighting it would be difficult and would waste precious fuel. The morning routine begins with checking the fire and adding fresh wood. The cottage is always filled with smoke, despite the chimney, and your eyes water constantly. This smoke is both curse and blessing. It's difficult to breathe and makes everything smell of wood smoke. But it also helps preserve the meat hanging from the rafters and discourages insects and rodents that might try to get into food stores. Breakfast is simple, but hearty. Porridge made from ground oats or barley, perhaps flavored with a small amount of salted pork or dried herbs. The porridge is cooked in a large iron pot that hangs over the fire, and the pot rarely leaves its position over the flames. This constant cooking helps keep the cottage warm while providing hot food that helps maintain body temperature. After breakfast, there are daily tasks that must be completed regardless of weather. Animals must be fed and cared for, though this is now done mostly indoors. The chickens, kept in a corner of the main room, require daily attention and fresh water that must be kept from freezing. The goat needs hay and grain, and her milk provides essential nutrition for your family. Water collection becomes one of the most challenging daily tasks. The well in the village center often has a layer of ice that must be broken each morning. Drawing water requires several people working together, one to break the ice, one to lower and raise the bucket, and others to carry the heavy water containers back to individual cottages. The water carriers wrap their hands in wool cloth to prevent frostbite. But even so, their fingers become numb and painful from the cold. Margaret spends her days managing the household's resources with the precision of a military quartermaster. She knows exactly how much food the family has, how much they consume each day, and how long supplies will last. Every meal is planned carefully to ensure that nutrition is maintained while making food stores last until spring. She keeps detailed mental records of every grain of barley, every preserved apple, every strip of dried meat. The children's education continues during winter, but it takes on a more practical character. Robert learns to carve wooden tools and repair household items. He practices with the bow and arrows that might be needed for hunting if food stores run low. Mary learns the complex skills of managing a medieval household, how to spin wool efficiently, how to prepare medicinal herbs, and how to preserve food. Evenings are the most social time of the medieval winter day. Once the essential daily tasks are completed, families gather around the hearth for activities that serve both practical and social purposes. Margaret continues her spinning and weaving by firelight, while you work on carving wooden bowls or repairing tools. The children might practice writing on small pieces of slate or learn arithmetic using pebbles. These evening hours are also when the village's oral tradition is maintained and passed down. Stories are told not just for entertainment, but as a way of preserving important information. Agnes, the village storyteller, might visit your cottage on particularly cold nights, bringing news from other families and sharing tales that contain survival wisdom. Her stories about past winters help everyone understand what challenges they might face and how previous generations overcame them. The village priest makes regular visits to individual cottages during winter, partly for spiritual guidance, but also to check on everyone's welfare. Father Benedict brings news from the outside world. Perhaps word from the Lord's manor about plans for spring, or stories from travelers who passed through before the worst weather arrived. These visits provide crucial social contact that helps maintain morale during the isolating winter months. Religious observance becomes more important during winter, both as spiritual comfort and as community gathering. When weather permits, villagers still attend church services, though the small stone building is bitterly cold. Everyone brings heated stones wrapped in cloth to warm their feet during the long service. The priest's sermons often focus on perseverance, faith during hardship, and the promise of spring's eventual return. The winter solstice in December marks the longest night of the year. And while medieval peasants might not understand the astronomical significance, they certainly feel its psychological impact. The days have been growing shorter for months, and by December, daylight lasts only a few hours. Most work must be done by firelight or the dim illumination from oil lamps made with animal fat. Christmas preparations provide a welcome break from the grimness of winter survival, though medieval Christmas celebrations are quite different from modern ones. The focus is primarily religious, with special church services and perhaps slightly better food than usual. Families might save a small amount of preserved meat or honey cakes for Christmas dinner. And children might receive simple gifts like carved wooden toys or new woolen mittens. The 12 days of Christmas, from December 25th to January 6th, represent a time when normal work routines are suspended as much as possible. This isn't because of leisure, but because these are traditionally the coldest and most dangerous days of winter. Families hunker down in their cottages, venture outside only when absolutely necessary, and focus on maintaining warmth and conserving energy. January brings some of the harshest weather of the winter. Snow may be several feet deep, making travel between cottages dangerous or impossible. You might not see your neighbors for days at a time, and families become completely isolated with only their stored resources for survival. The cottage becomes not just home, but an entire world unto itself. During these isolated periods, family relationships intensify in both positive and negative ways. The stress of confinement, limited food, and constant cold can create tensions. But it also forces family members to work together in ways that build strong bonds. Children learn to be helpful rather than playful. And everyone understands that their survival depends on cooperation and mutual support. Food rationing becomes critical during the deepest part of winter. Margaret carefully measures out grain for each meal, and the family's diet becomes increasingly monotonous. Breakfast might be thin porridge, lunch might be bread with a small amount of preserved meat, and dinner might be a watery stew with turnips and onions. Fresh food is a distant memory, and even preserved foods must be consumed sparingly. The psychological challenges of medieval winter are as severe as the physical ones. The combination of cold, hunger, confinement, and darkness creates conditions that would challenge anyone's mental health. Depression and anxiety are common, though these conditions aren't understood in modern terms. Instead, they might be attributed to spiritual causes or simply accepted as part of winter's hardship. Maintaining hope during the darkest winter months requires conscious effort and community support. Families remind each other of spring's eventual return by talking about plans for planting crops and repairing buildings. They might save seeds from last year's harvest and examine them by firelight, discussing where and when they'll be planted. These future-focused conversations help maintain morale when the present seems unbearably harsh. February often brings the deepest cold of the winter, even as daylight hours slowly begin to increase. This is when food stores are running lowest, and when the accumulated stress of months of cold and confinement takes its greatest toll. Some villagers don't survive February, either succumbing to cold, hunger, or the diseases that spread easily in confined spaces with poor ventilation. The cottage atmosphere in February is thick with smoke, cooking odors, and the smell of unwashed bodies. Bathing is impossible during the coldest months, as heating enough water would require too much precious fuel. Everyone's clothes become permanently smoky and grimy, and the distinction between day clothes and night clothes disappears as everyone wears multiple layers constantly. Despite these harsh conditions, daily life continues with its own rhythm and routines. You still wake each morning to tend the fire. Margaret still prepares meals from dwindling supplies, and the children still help with household tasks. The human capacity to adapt to difficult circumstances and find normalcy even in extreme conditions is remarkable. And medieval villagers demonstrate this resilience daily. As winter progresses toward its end, subtle signs of change begin to appear. The angle of sunlight through the cottage's small windows shifts slightly. Icicles hanging from the thatched roof begin to drip during the warmest part of the day. These tiny changes are noticed and celebrated by people who have been watching desperately for any sign that winter's grip is loosening. The first hints of spring's approach create a sense of anticipation and hope that helps carry everyone through the final weeks of winter. Conversations turn increasingly toward spring plans. Which fields will be planted first? What repairs need to be made to buildings and tools? And how the community will work together during the busier mind and body. The village begins a systematic assessment of winter damage that will determine much of the spring work schedule. Your own cottage shows the typical effects of months of harsh weather. Cracks in the wattle and daub walls where the mixture has shrunk and separated. Loose thatch on the roof where wind has pulled away straw. And a chimney that needs cleaning after months of constant fires. The door frame has shifted slightly, creating gaps that let in cold air. And the oiled parchment covering the windows has torn in several places. Margaret walks through the cottage with you, pointing out each repair that needs attention. The floor, made of packed earth, has developed uneven spots where foot traffic and moisture have created depressions and ridges. The wooden shutters that provide extra insulation for the windows have warped from moisture and temperature changes and no longer fit properly in their frames. Every surface in the cottage bears the marks of winter's assault. Smoke stains on the walls wear patterns on frequently used items, and the general grime that accumulates when cleaning must take second place to survival. Outside the cottage, the damage is equally evident, but somehow more hopeful to contemplate, since outdoor repairs can actually be accomplished in decent weather. The small fence around your vegetable plot has several broken posts where frost pushed stones out of the ground, creating gaps where hungry animals will be able to reach crops if not repaired quickly. The path to your cottage door has been worn into a muddy channel that will need fresh stones and drainage work to remain passable during spring rains. The cottage roof requires immediate attention, and as several areas of thatch have become thin or damaged over the winter months. You climb carefully onto the roof structure, checking for loose or broken rafters underneath the straw covering. The thatch itself needs fresh material woven in where wind has pulled away the older straw, and the entire roof will benefit from a new layer of straw to improve water shedding and insulation for next winter. Your farming tools, stored inside the cottage throughout winter, need various levels of repair and maintenance. The wooden handles of hoes and rakes have shrunk in the dry indoor air, causing the metal heads to loosen. These joints need to be retightened and reinforced before the tools can be used safely for spring work. The plow, your most important and expensive tool, requires careful inspection of every joint and surface to ensure it will survive another growing season. Metal tools show the effects of the damp cottage atmosphere despite your efforts to keep them dry. Rust spots have appeared on iron implements, requiring careful cleaning and treatment with animal fat to prevent further corrosion. The cutting edges of hoes and scythes have dulled from use and neglect and will need sharpening before they can effectively cut through weeds and crops. Robert helps you examine each tool systematically, learning to identify problems and understand solutions. This hands-on education in tool maintenance is crucial for his future as a medieval farmer. And he takes the responsibility seriously. He learns to feel for loose handles, spot early rust formation, and understand how proper tool care prevents much larger problems later. The village blacksmith, Old William, prepares for one of his busiest seasons as every family brings tools needing professional repair or replacement. His forge glows hot from dawn to dusk as he reshapes damaged plowshares, creates new metal fittings for wooden tools, and forges entirely new implements to replace those beyond repair. The sound of his hammer against metal becomes a constant background rhythm that signals the village's return to productive activity. Community cooperation becomes essential as the scope of repair work exceeds what any single family can accomplish alone. Neighbors organize work parties where several families combine their labor to tackle large projects efficiently. Today you might help John re-thatch his cottage roof, knowing that tomorrow he and others will help you repair your fence and clear drainage channels around your property. The village carpenter, Thomas Miller, emerges from winter with a backlog of work that will keep him busy for weeks. Cottage doors have warped and no longer close properly. Window frames need rebuilding, and furniture has suffered from months of damp conditions and heavy use. His workshop, located in a small building behind his cottage, fills with damaged items waiting for attention, and the sound of sawing and planing wood joins the blacksmith's hammer as soundtrack to spring renewal. Margaret organizes the women's spring cleaning efforts, which go far beyond simple tidiness to address health and safety concerns that accumulated over winter. Months of closed-up living have left every surface coated with soot and grime, and the risk of fire from accumulated debris around hearths makes thorough cleaning a safety necessity rather than merely aesthetic preference. The cottage walls require scraping and recoating where smoke and moisture have damaged the surface finish. Margaret mixes fresh lime wash, a mixture of limestone, water, and sometimes animal hair for binding, that will brighten the interior surfaces and provide antimicrobial protection against the molds and bacteria that thrive in damp conditions. This annual refreshing of wall surfaces helps maintain the cottage's habitability and reduces health risks. Floor cleaning presents special challenges since medieval cottage floors are typically packed earth rather than wood or stone. Margaret and Mary sweep constantly to remove accumulated debris, then apply fresh clay mixed with straw to create a smooth, hard surface. This clay flooring, when properly maintained, provides reasonable comfort and cleanliness, but requires regular renewal to remain functional. The village priest, Father Benedict, organizes community work parties to address damage to shared resources that everyone depends on. The village well requires cleaning after months of use and potential contamination from melting snow. The small bridge over the creek that runs past the village has lost several planks to winter storms and needs repair before spring floods make the work more difficult. The church building itself requires significant attention after winter's harsh treatment. Stone walls have weathered well, but the wooden roof structure shows signs of stress from heavy snow loads. Several windows have lost their oiled parchment coverings and need replacement before spring rains begin. The church's small bell tower requires inspection to ensure the bell rope and support structures remain sound. Agricultural preparation dominates much of the spring repair and preparation work. Fields that lay fallow over winter need clearing of debris, weeds, and accumulated material. Plowing can't begin until the soil dries sufficiently, but preliminary work of clearing and planting can start immediately. You walk through your assigned field strips, noting where drainage needs improvement and where soil amendments might be beneficial. The village's shared agricultural tools require community attention and repair. The large plow owned collectively by several families needs thorough inspection and maintenance before the crucial plowing season begins. Harrows used to break up soil after plowing need new wooden teeth where old ones have broken or worn out. These shared tools represent significant investments that the community depends on for successful farming. Seed preparation becomes a daily concern as the spring progresses. Margaret carefully sorts through saved seeds from last year's harvest, testing their viability by placing samples in damp cloth to see if they sprout. Seeds that fail this test must be discarded, while those that pass are carefully stored and prepared for planting. The quality and quantity of available seeds will directly determine this year's harvest success. Animal care requirements change dramatically as spring weather allows livestock to spend time outdoors again. The small area behind your cottage that will serve as pasture needs fence repair and clearing of debris that accumulated over winter. Your goat, confined indoors for months, requires gradual reintroduction to outdoor conditions and fresh vegetation to avoid digestive problems from sudden dietary changes. The village's shared pasture land requires community organization and maintenance. Everyone who owns animals must contribute labor to repair fencing, clear drainage channels, and remove hazards that could injure livestock. This shared grazing land represents one of the village's most valuable resources, and its proper maintenance requires coordinated effort and agreed-upon rules for its use. Tool-making and craft work expand beyond simple repair to creation of new implements needed for the coming year. You spend evenings carving new wooden handles for tools, weaving baskets for carrying and storing crops, and creating the countless small implements that make agricultural work possible. Robert learns these skills by watching and helping, gradually taking on more complex tasks as his abilities develop. Margaret increases her textile production as warmer weather makes indoor work more bearable, and as the family's clothing and bedding show the effects of winter's heavy use. Spinning wheel rhythms fill the cottage as she transforms last year's wool into thread, then weaves the thread into cloth on her small loom. This cloth will become new clothing, patches for worn garments, and household items like towels and blankets. The village begins planning cooperative work schedules that will maximize efficiency during the busy growing season ahead. Plowing, planting, and harvesting require more labor than individual families can provide, so traditional systems of shared work and mutual obligation come into play. You'll spend several days helping with your neighbor's plowing, knowing that the same neighbors will help when your fields need attention. Community meetings become more frequent and important as spring work accelerates. The village council, made up of senior families and led by the priest, coordinates major projects and resolves conflicts over resource use and work schedules. These meetings, held in the church after evening services, address everything from repair priorities to grazing schedules to plans for community defense. Food stores, carefully managed through winter's scarcity, now require different management strategies as fresh foods become available, but stored foods must still be preserved until harvest. Margaret balances using up winter stores before they spoil with maintaining emergency reserves in case spring weather delays planting or damages early crops. This delicate balance requires constant attention and adjustment. The psychological transition from winter survival to spring productivity affects everyone differently, but creates overall community mood improvement. Conversations shift from concern about making it through another day to excitement about possibilities for the coming growing season. Children's energy returns as they can play outside safely, and their laughter once again becomes a regular part of the village's daily soundtrack. As April progresses into May, the transformation becomes complete. Your cottage, repaired and cleaned, feels like a home again rather than merely a survival shelter. The village paths, cleared of winter debris and reinforced with fresh stones, allow easy movement between neighbors. Tools, sharpened and mended, stand ready for the agricultural work that will dominate the coming months. Margaret plants the first seeds in the small garden behind your cottage. Hardy vegetables that can tolerate cool weather and provide fresh food while you wait for the main crops to mature. The sight of these first green shoots pushing through the dark soil represents hope made visible, proof that life continues its eternal cycle of renewal despite winter's harsh interruption. The village has survived another winter, and while the experience has left its marks on buildings, tools, and people, it has also reinforced the community bonds that make survival possible. Neighbors who shared food during the hardest weeks, families who helped with repairs and maintenance, and the collective knowledge that guided everyone through the darkest months. These relationships and resources provide the foundation for not just surviving, but thriving in the medieval world. As you stand outside your cottage on a warm May evening, listening to the sounds of normal village life, children playing, neighbors calling greetings, animals moving freely in their pastures, you reflect on the lessons that winter has taught. The importance of preparation and planning, the value of community cooperation, the strength that comes from enduring hardship together, and the deep satisfaction of surviving challenges that test every aspect of human resilience. The medieval winter has ended, but its memory will guide your family's preparations for the winter to come. Margaret will remember which preservation techniques worked best. You'll recall which repairs proved most crucial, and the children will carry forward the survival skills they've learned. This knowledge, accumulated over generations and tested each winter, represents one of humanity's most valuable inheritances: the wisdom to endure and the hope to continue. Summer work lies ahead, with its own challenges and rewards, but tonight the cottage is warm without constant fire tending. Food is adequate without careful rationing, and sleep comes easily without the fear that has haunted winter nights. You've survived another medieval winter, and in doing so, you've participated in one of human history's greatest ongoing achievements: the determination to persist, adapt, and find meaning, even in the harshest circumstances. And so we close this gentle journey into the past, where ordinary people faced extraordinary challenges with courage, wisdom, and mutual support. Until next time, may your own winters be warm and your springs full of hope. Thank you for joining us at Boring History for Sleep, where the past whispers its stories to help you find peaceful rest, sweet dreams, and good night.